I used to believe that love was this, being present, being the safe haven, even when the storm came from the one you loved most. I thought it was beautiful to be the one who calmed, who understood, who stayed. When he trembled, when he said that the world was spinning too fast, that he couldn't breathe, I left everything. I stopped what I was doing, canceled appointments, turned off the phone. I would run into his arms as if it were a life-or-death mission. At first I thought it was love. I thought he needed me more than anyone ever had. He said I was the only one who could make the pain go away, and hearing that kept me there. It gave me purpose, but little by little, I began to notice a pattern. He only broke down when I tried to walk away. He only fell to the floor when I said I needed time. He only lost his breath when I said, enough, and I went back. I always went back. Little by little, my life ceased to exist. My friends disappeared, my family drifted away. My routine became erratic, shaped by his crises, and every time I considered leaving, something in him collapsed. I saw despair in his eyes, and the weight of it pulled me back like an invisible chain. For a long time, I believed he was fighting internal monsters, but one day I realized the monster was there, in front of me, calm, waiting for me to fall for the same trick again. And that's when everything started to change, because that last time, I didn't kneel beside him. At first, all I wanted was to understand, to help, to heal. I felt needed, almost irreplaceable. It was as if his love depended on my ability to endure, and I endured, even without sleeping properly, even with my anxiety attacks that I pretended not to feel. Because for me, he always came first. He was sick, I thought. It wasn't his fault. It was life being cruel to an overly sensitive heart. But as time went by, what once seemed like fragility began to turn into control. Disguised as pain, but still control. He chose the moments. It was subtle, almost invisible. It was only when I talked about leaving the house, visiting my mother, meeting up with a friend from college. It was only when I mentioned the possibility of taking a course abroad or taking that internship in another city. Suddenly, he would fall to the floor, his hands shaking, his breathing short, his eyes wide as if he were seeing death. And there I was, once again, kneeling beside him, holding his hand, breathing deeply, and asking him to calm down, while my heart broke in silence. At first, it was pure despair. I cried with him, called emergency services, wanted to do everything right. But after a while, I already knew what to do. I knew when it would come. I even knew the exact phrases he would say. Don't leave me. I can't take it. Without you, I'm done for. It was when this became routine that I began to feel trapped, because as much as I loved him, I was also afraid. Afraid of what might happen if I said no, afraid of causing a breakdown, afraid of being the cause of a tragedy. He said he didn't take his medication because he only trusted me, that going to a psychiatrist was impossible because they don't understand how I feel, only you understand. And that put me in a dangerous position. I became everything: nurse, mother, therapist, salvation, less of a woman, less of a girlfriend, and certainly less of myself. I began to lose my sparkle. Life became gray. I stopped getting dressed up, going out, dreaming, because any sign of autonomy on my part was a threat to him, and a threat to him meant a new crisis. It meant another scene on the living room floor, another sleepless night, another time I told myself I couldn't leave, that he needed me. There was an episode that remained etched in my memory like an invisible scar. I had an important job interview. It was a real chance to start over, to breathe outside that suffocating room. He knew that. He knew that day meant a lot to me. But an hour before I left, he started writhing on the couch. He said his chest hurt, that his heart was going to stop, that he felt horrible pressure in his head. I tried to stay calm, but between his screams and sobs, I panicked. I canceled the interview. I lost the job. And you know what's worse? 2 hours later, he was playing video games, calm, as if nothing had happened. That's when I started to have doubts, not about his pain, but about its origin, about his intentions. Because when someone is truly suffering, they don't choose the moment. They don't calculate the impact. They don't open their eyes seconds after seeing that you haven't reacted. But he reacted. He reacted when he saw me crying silently in the bathroom and knocked on the door saying, "It was just an attack. You have to understand me." He reacted when I said, "I can't take it anymore." And he replied, Then kill me now, because if you go, I'll kill myself. Those words echoed in my mind for weeks, because there he crossed a line, the line between suffering and blackmail, between fragility and perversity. I started to hide my feelings. I couldn't cry. I couldn't complain. He was always worse. He always had a new crisis, always stronger pain. And if I dared to set my limits, he said I was being cruel, that I was like everyone else who abandoned him. And I, trying not to be like everyone else, stayed, even when I had no strength left, even when I myself was already in pieces. Until one day, without planning it, I spoke to a psychologist. She was a professional at the company where I worked, and in a quick session, I told her everything. And she looked at me with an expression that mixed compassion and warning. And she said, "What you're describing has a name. It's emotional abuse based on manipulation, and it can destroy you." Those words cut me like a knife, because that was exactly how I was feeling, but I didn't know how to name it. I felt destroyed, without identity, without freedom, without a voice. I went home that day and watched him, as if I were seeing him for the first time, and everything seemed so clear. The moments when he smiled right after seeing me back down, the glances he cast to see if I was watching his performance, the control he exercised with a trembling hand and a desperate phrase. It was like a script, a ritual that always ended with me on my knees and him, in control. But even knowing all this, I still hesitated, because what kept me there was not just fear, it was guilt. The weight of believing that if I left, I would be pushing someone to the edge of an abyss. I had to be sure. I needed to see with my own eyes what deep down I already knew. So I tested him. One morning, I told him I was going away for the weekend, that I needed some time. I watched. I timed it. In less than 20 minutes, he started sweating. He said the floor was spinning, that his vision was darkening. He started screaming my name. But this time, I didn't move. I stood there watching. My heart was racing. My hands were sweating, but I stood firm. And then he stopped. He slowly opened his eyes. He stared at me, as if he were surprised that the game hadn't worked. And there, at that moment, I knew, without a doubt, he was pretending. And it wasn't just pretending. It was a trap, cold, calculated, and cruel. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, sitting on the floor of my room, feeling the weight of everything I had experienced fall on me like a silent avalanche. It was the first time in years that I saw what was really happening without trying to justify it, without trying to deceive myself, without trying to protect him. And for the first time, I felt fear, not for him, but for myself. The feeling of having been deceived for so long, of having given up my whole life for someone who used my compassion against me, was suffocating. Each memory came back like a slap in the face. The internship I lost, the birthdays I missed, the dreams I buried. I began to see myself as a prisoner who didn't even know she was locked up. The cell was made of guilt, false promises, staged crises, and an emotional dependence that he cultivated in me drop by drop until I was dried up inside. In the days that followed, he realized that something had changed. I no longer ran when he said he was feeling bad. I didn't stop what I was doing to watch the show. And that made him nervous, angry, threatened. He started saying that I was different, cold, selfish, that I was letting him die little by little. But I wasn't cold. I was just finally waking up. And then he upped the ante. The crises became more dramatic, more noisy. One day he threw his cell phone on the floor and shouted that if I walked out that door, he would throw himself off the balcony. I froze. For a few seconds, the old version of me reappeared. The one who gave up everything, the one who bowed down. But she was gone quickly, because I knew. I had seen too much. And I replied in a low but firm voice, "Then get help. Because I'm not your medicine." He looked at me as if I had slapped him. And in that moment, I saw who he was. I saw the anger hidden behind the fragility. I saw the manipulation disguised as despair. I saw that all of it, every attack, every tear, every scene, was about control, about maintaining power. And what scared him most was not losing me. It was losing the control he had over me. I began to carefully plan my exit. I knew I couldn't just pack my bags and leave. He would use everything he had, guilt, blackmail, maybe even threats. So I started slowly. I reactivated old contacts. I talked to my family. I explained to some friends what was happening. I told my mother everything, and she cried. She cried because she knew something was wrong, but she had no idea how bad it was, and she promised she would be with me when I decided to leave. Meanwhile, I watched his every move. I started recording some conversations. Not to expose him, but to remind myself, in case I tried to romanticize what had happened. I wrote a diary with dates, episodes, phrases he repeated. It was like putting together a dark puzzle, and the more pieces I fit together, the clearer the picture of who he really was became. The last straw came on a seemingly ordinary afternoon. I came home from work and found the living room in disarray. The sofa was overturned, glasses were broken on the floor, and there was a knife on the table. He was in the corner of the room, breathing heavily, sweating, saying that this time it was real, this time he was going to end it all. I tried to stay calm, but something in my whole body was saying, "You're in danger." I went to the bedroom quietly, locked the door, and called my mom. In less than 20 minutes, she arrived with my brother. They didn't knock, they just walked in. He froze, he screamed, he cursed, he begged, he fell to the floor. He pretended to faint, but no one reacted. None of us approached him. None of us believed him, because now everyone knew. I packed my suitcase while he yelled behind the door. He said he wouldn't survive, that I was condemning him to death, that it would be my fault. But I continued. I took my clothes, my documents, my books, and when I left the room, I looked him in the eyes and said, "I loved you, truly, and that's exactly why I'm leaving. Because no love deserves to die like this." He followed me to the elevator. He begged. He cried. He promised to change. He said he would seek help. And maybe, deep down, part of me still wanted to believe him. But I had heard those promises before. I had already come back. I had already tried. I had already lost myself. That night, I slept at my mother's house. It was the first time in a long time that I was able to lie down without my heart racing, without fear of a crisis arising in the middle of the night, without guilt gnawing at my chest. I slept, and I dreamed. And I woke up with a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. In the days that followed, he sent messages, many. A flood of audio messages, videos, texts, some angry, others begging, some blaming me, others claiming to be victims. But I didn't respond, not because I didn't feel anything, but because I already understood everything. I was dealing with someone who had learned to use his own pain as a weapon, who manipulated with the precision of a surgeon, who turned me into a character in his script, someone whose job was to keep the show going. And the role he hated to see me take on the most was that of the protagonist of my own story. It took me months to rebuild myself. I went to therapy. I learned about emotional abuse, gaslighting, emotional dependence. I read testimonials from other women who had gone through similar things. I cried for myself, for them, for all those who are still trapped in this cycle. But I also got up. I looked at myself in the mirror and slowly began to recognize myself. It was a slow process. It still is. Sometimes a song or a place takes me back to those days. But today I have tools. I know the difference between fragility and manipulation, between love and imprisonment, between caring for someone and being held hostage. And most importantly, I came back to life. I started dreaming again, laughing, going out with friends, sleeping peacefully. I became my own person again, because he pretended to be broken so that I would never realize who was really breaking inside. And that person was me. It took me a long time to understand that it was never love, not the kind that cares, that welcomes, that wants you to be free and whole. What I experienced was a silent game, full of emotional traps, where every step I tried to take away triggered a new collapse. And the cruelest thing of all is that, for a long time, I blamed myself. I blamed myself for not seeing it sooner, for staying so long, for believing so much, for giving myself completely, until there was nothing left. But the truth is that no one teaches us how to identify this type of abuse. When the aggression doesn't come with shouting or pushing, when it doesn't leave visible bruises, it's easier to justify. And that's exactly what he did. He didn't push me against the wall, but he pushed me against guilt. He didn't lock me in the house, but he made leaving a reason for crisis. He didn't say, "You are my prisoner," but he said, "Without you, I die." And so, he kept me there, for love, for pity, for fear. The day I left was the day I started living again, For the first time in years, I could hear the sound of my silence without interruptions, without despair knocking at the door, without threats disguised as pleas. I remember sitting on my mother's porch and just breathing. That's all, breathing. And feeling that the air, for the first time, was not laden with guilt. In the months that followed, I rebuilt parts of myself that I no longer even remembered existed. I started talking to my friends again. I reconnected with my family. I took that course I had put off so many times, and most importantly, I started real therapy, not to fix him, as I had tried so many times, but to take care of myself. And it was in therapy that I understood one of the hardest things to accept. I had been emotionally manipulated, that each of his crises was a strategy to keep me there, that he used my empathy as a leash, and that deep down, he never wanted to get better, because getting better meant losing control, and he would rather see me sink with him than see me escape. It hurts to accept this. It hurts to realize that someone who said they loved you was, in fact, the reason you stopped loving yourself. It hurts to face the memories and see in them not love, but imprisonment. But this pain, however strong it may be, passes, and what remains is freedom. I learned to say no, to set boundaries, to recognize the signs. I learned that love is not a burden. It is not a debt. It is not a minefield where every step can cause an emotional explosion. Love, true love, is home. It is respite. It is partnership. It does not shackle. Today, I look back and feel compassion for who I was, for that version of me who thought that love meant putting up with everything, who confused care with sacrifice, who believed that her value came from her ability to endure. But I'm also proud, because I left, because I chose to live, because I had the courage to look pain in the eye and say, "You will not define me." And if there's one thing I can say to anyone listening to this story right now and recognizing themselves in parts of it, it's this: you are not alone. And above all, you are not weak for having stayed. You believed, you tried, you loved with everything you had. But now it's time to love yourself with the same intensity, with the same devotion. You are not responsible for anyone else's healing, and you certainly shouldn't be punished for wanting to breathe, for wanting peace, for wanting to exist again. Today, I walk with invisible scars. They are here. Some still hurt from time to time, but they are mine, and they remind me of the strength I had. They remind me that I survived something that many people do not survive, that I rebuilt myself from scratch, that I transformed pain into awareness, guilt into boundaries, fear into courage. I am not the same, and thank goodness, because that version of me was dying in silence. And today, I finally came back to life out loud.